Many times I've been asked, who is the Antichrist? And how would you recognize the Antichrist in the world today? And my sharing with you is my own personal view, and I do not represent a specific church or religious point of view. I come to you, as always, from the heart. And I follow the simple teaching of Jesus, the Barefoot Galilean, who said, "You will recognize my disciples by their love for one another." So the meaning of the word Antichrist implies to me that it refers to anyone, any organization, however powerful, however prestigious, that anyone who opposes the Christ, the Jesus, Son of God, the cosmic Christ, is the Antichrist, or a part of that mindset. And I know I've heard many people say that their teacher, their spiritual teacher whom they love, tells them that Jesus did not die on the cross, that he had a step in, a walk in, a substitute. Now, whilst that may be true for them, I have to honour my heart, and I believe that Jesus fulfilled the prophecies of the Old Testament, and that his death on the cross was a reality. Now, I've no proof. I wasn't there. So I can't say with conviction other than what my heart is guided to believe from my prayer time as one in service to Christ, as a mystical bride of Christ. And I know there are lots of theories, and there are lots of powerful people in our world that we were warned about and termed by Jesus as false prophets. Now, recently I was doing some research for a recording, and immediately I got a strong message to click on Oprah. And I'm very fond of Oprah Winfrey. She certainly has a mass audience and is a multi-million-pound industry. But then I began to read some other people's points of view, saying that Oprah is the Antichrist. And I was quite disturbed by that, because I've never perceived Oprah as being anything other than a law-abiding, decent, respectable woman who, like most of us, has had issues with weight. But then I began to research these videos, and having spent several hours listening to them, I began listening to what Oprah was saying, and I began to discern in my heart that her message was not of God. It was not inspired by God. And that is a purely personal point of view. And whilst I respect the woman in question, I would have to say that her message is gobbledygook. And it's akin to that of being a false prophet. And yet I know false prophets have many followers, and many of them have huge reputations and big egos, and very few of them wish to follow the Barefoot Galilean, because discipleship with the Barefoot Galilean is costly. And one great role model I have, apart from Jesus, and to name another, Gandhi and Buddha and the Dalai Lama, has got to be an Anglican minister that I met when I lived in Llandudno back in the 80s, and he was called David Watson. His book, The Cost of Discipleship, touched my life, and his talk was on forgiveness. But he talked about there is a price to pay for being true to your heart. and for honouring God's promise in a modern world that has lost sight of truth. And I know from the many people I've seen here as clients, as student therapists, I've actually witnessed some pretty horrific moments of therapists who were brought here, guided here, who actually possessed entities. And I was made aware of them, but in the name of Christ, they were released to the light. But I've also been aware that when I was out on the road travelling, running retreats, I met some very beautiful people, but I also met people who were very threatened by the simplicity of my life. And the symbol I wear around my neck, the Teo symbol, made of sacred olive wood, you could say is a talisman, but it's more than that. It's a symbol of my contract, honouring my sacred contract with God. And this has drawn out the other face of evil from individuals who've backed off or who've abused me verbally. And I know that in this modern world we have to be very, very cautious. We have to be grounded and we have to protect ourselves. And if we live that simple life, not as a monastic or even an oblate, but if we are living in a simple, loving relationship with God, where we honour the Lord our God, where we love our neighbour as ourselves, then we have nothing to fear. Absolutely nothing to fear. And if we are a people of prayer, as Mother Mary guides us to do, in all her apparitions, that's the one thing she says: pray and fast, and ease the weight of the burden on her Son's heart. Now the Antichrist, as I've said, has many faces. Maybe Oprah is one, but I'm not going to say that. I believe we should judge a person by their fruits, not by their suits or their fancy hairdos. And if what they're saying doesn't resonate, or if we feel that we're being compromised in our belief, then we have to back off. We have to send them love and light. But I would say this: the Antichrist is alive and well, and by George is he kicking. Recently I came across a scenario that happened within a religious spiritual organization that trained people as interfaith ministers. And I know from what I heard and from what I witnessed in certain individuals who were brought here, that they represented the dark, not the light. And a situation arose where a person of the light, who's a carrier, a vortex of the light, was actually singled out for the most horrendous and vitriolic attack. And that attack was carried out in the name of God. But we prayed for that person, and thank God they're now getting it together. But they were horrified that people of like mind could turn in on themselves, on their ego, and rather than listen to what their heart was saying, embrace their ego, which I truly do believe is the seedbed for the Antichrist. And we have to be very careful in spiritual direction, haven't we? Because I truly do believe that NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is not a tool for the spiritual path. Because NLP asks you to ask the question, when you're given a simple message, what is that saying? If God speaks to your heart or shares with you something, and you start asking from the ego, what is that saying? Then the evil one, the Antichrist, leads you off your path, creating spiritual impoverishment. So rather than judge the book by the cover, discern, ask the Spirit of God to give you a discernment that would recognize what God is saying and honor it. Name it, shame it, release it with love. Don't get involved in confrontation. Just send it love and light. Bless you. Be strong. Have faith.